Okay, so we are moving on to our next panel. It is about harnessing Bitcoin DeFi, technical challenges and solutions in layer 2 protocols. And we've got from Wolf Finance, Cade Bergman. Cade, oh, there you are. You were right next to me. Give it up for Cade. Yes. And here's a mic. And on stage, we've got Han Liu from BitFi. There you go, Han. We've got Filipe Gonzalez joining from InceptionLRT. Look, you guys are all coming from different angles. I'm like, what's going on? And finally, it was like, and James Young from Collab.Land. Enjoy.
Testing. All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to the panel. Shout out to BitLayer for putting this on. My name is Cade. I'll be emceeing this panel. We've got an awesome panel here, a bunch of experts in the game. Really excited to get into it. Like she said, we're going to be talking about harnessing Bitcoin DeFi in today's talk, technical challenges and solutions in layer 2 protocols. So real quick, I'm just going to introduce our panel here. We've got Han Liu from BitFi, prominent figure in the cryptocurrency sector, best known as the founder of BitFi, a CDeFi platform. Previously co-founded and served as CTO of Ascendex, a cryptocurrency exchange. He also worked at AQR Capital Management and BlackRock. And BitFi combines centralized and decentralized finance to maximize asset yields. The platform gained significant traction, reaching a peak total value locked, or TVL, of $400 million. And Leo's experience spans traditional finance and the cryptocurrency world, positioning him as a key innovator in financial technology. His work at BitFi highlights his focus on secure staking yields and multi-layer yield generation strategies. We'll go to Filipe next from InceptionLRT, prominent figure in the DeFi and restaking ecosystem, core contributor to InceptionLRT, a liquid restaking protocol. Serves as the CEO at Inception Labs, which has undergone organizational changes following a merger of M4 protocol. And additionally, he's the founder and CEO of Tegas Labs, a venture studio focused on liquid staking and restaking technologies. He also actively participates in industry events such as Restaking Unchained, Decentralization Unveiled, where he discusses decentralization and shared security in restaking. And finally, we have James Young over there from Collab.Land, CEO and co-founder of Abridged Inc., parent company of Collab.Land, a platform used by thousands of online communities. I've definitely heard of them. I founded and grown web-based companies since early 2000s, including being the first developer at Meta, formerly Facebook, game Farmville. Young also is an early member of the cryptocurrency community, co-creating the Malak DAO framework and co-summoning Meta Cartel, if you guys have heard of that. He co-founded Abridged in 2019 to support collaborative economies with seamless blockchain UX. And in 2023, Collab.Land actually transitioned control to its community through a blockchain-based token and collaborative structure. And my name is Cade. I am from Wolf Financial, core team, a company specializing in comprehensive marketing and branding strategies for the finance, technology, and crypto sectors. I am the host of the crypto division, and we just host daily spaces on all things going on in the industry. My expertise lies in content creation, branding, and podcasting. So we're going to jump into this conversation. I'm excited to chat with you three today up here. We're going to be exploring an exciting and rapidly evolving space, Bitcoin DeFi, and the critical role of layer 2 protocols in shaping its future. As decentralized finance continues to push boundaries, Bitcoin's integration into this landscape presents both significant opportunities and complex challenges. So to kick off the discussion, let's just consider this as just like a base foundation. What are the key limitations of Bitcoin's base layer that hinders DeFi innovation? How can the layer 2 solutions help unlock new possibilities for scalability, security, and financial accessibility? So I'll go for the first question to Han. We have a few different questions, actually. So to you, I will ask, what are some of the most significant technical challenges that Bitcoin DeFi faces today, and how can the layer 2 protocols help address them?
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot for the intro. Also, love your sunglasses. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone here understands that Bitcoin is is the mother of all crypto, and it's simple and elegant, but it's also simple and dumb, right? So it got a lot of challenges. Its performance is horrible. The TPS is horrible. It's really hard to scale, and it doesn't really have a Turing-complete scripting language that allows for smart financial applications like the other smart contracts do. And of course, the L2s, but by definition, they're here to solve the problem. So I think that usually the technical challenges lie in how we find a balance between improving performance, and at the same time not sacrificing security. Right? It's always a balance. And I think Charlie in the keynote also mentioned something I think which is also very important, is that I think for layer 2 solutions, it's important to focus on the right question. There needs to be there shouldn't be like a single point of failure, which is the case for a lot of L2s, where there's a multi-sig that's critical in the in the whole logic, and then that creates a layer of centralized risk, and also there could be other risks. We all saw the Bybit hack, right? It's essentially it's issue with the safe, but it's a multi-sig, right? So I think just in summary, the challenge is how do those solutions make the right balance and trade-offs? Because in theory, it's not hard to problem solve, but finding the right balance, that's a difficult part, in my opinion. Yeah.
Very nice. Next question over to Filipe. How do you see the concept of restaking evolving in the broader DeFi ecosystem, and what implications might this have for Bitcoin?
So for the restaking ecosystem, right, the difference between proof of stake and shared security, right? Proof of stake is really about you take a token, you stake it, you provide security to one single network. If the node operators do something wrong, the delegated tokens get slashed. With shared security, you're actually providing security to multiple tokens at the same time, but you have also a greater flexibility in terms of which tokens are you using as a slashable collateral, right? So Bitcoin makes it actually a very good use case because it's the token with the largest crypto asset market cap, and at the same time, it doesn't really have much utility. It doesn't really even have really interesting yield, right? Because proof of work doesn't really give yield for stakers. So restaking Bitcoin is really like a use case where you can use that asset and its market value to provide shared security, not only to L1s actually, or BTC L2s, but a much broader range of networks, which could be price oracles, bridges, it could be AI agents. So the use cases are extremely broad actually. And BTC is actually very well positioned to capture part of this yield. And I think in the panel before, someone was saying that giving kind of altcoin yield on top of BTC is not really attractive. But I will counter-argue that when you have a liquid restaking token that is auto-compounding actually all these shitcoins or whatever you call it, right? I mean, it's still auto-compounding into BTC, right? And there are also other ways called LRT looping, where you have BTC lenders that lend money, and the borrowers are actually borrowing it to restake BTC and actually get exposure to all these additional rewards. So you just need to match people with different risk profiles. So I see a lot of potential for restaking and BTC in general.
Very nice. Throw the next question over to James. Then we have a question that we're going to go to all the people on the panel as well. How can blockchain-based platforms facilitate more inclusive and accessible financial systems, particularly in the context of Bitcoin DeFi?
Oh, that's a good question. So just to serve some context, I come from the ETH world, was early in on ETH, and saw kind of the rise of DeFi. And in the so what we saw communities build up on ETH, and I saw Uniswap, Aave, and I think that for Bitcoin, there is this ability to kind of leapfrog. The analogy I would say is that, like, you had these third world countries, they didn't have the infra, and they leapfrogged to mobile. I think there's a really interesting design space that opens up because this is going to be fresh on Bitcoin. So I think that, if I was coming from the Bitcoin world, I would study all of the ETH DeFi, what went right, what went wrong, and then add some AI into it. Because I think that there's a ability to take a fresh take. With ETH, you had only TradFi to look at, right? So an analogy is that when the car was first invented, you had this thing called horsepower. Now we have engines with 500 horsepower. How are you going to measure and tie up 500 horses to see actually if that horsepower in your engine is actually accurate or not? It's an abstraction. I think that there's a moment now, if we can actually try and like learn from ETH, put this on the Bitcoin, and invent new primitives. Because I was there when ETH started. I saw these primitives like an automated market maker come up, and it was very much community driven. I think that if you're involved with Bitcoin DeFi on the L2, if you're a community member, you don't have to be someone from Wall Street, you don't have to come from TradFi. I think there's an advantage of not having to unlearn or be cemented in other ways of thinking to actually take a fresh take. And I think the meta, when it comes to AI and the opportunities here, we don't know what we don't know. So I would say come at it community focused with a fresh mind. And I remember early on in ETH, it wasn't necessarily just to make money. It was actually like, let's see how much fun we can have. And that actually is, I think, a better motivating factor than just getting, more APY or more yield. So I think that's the mentality I would come at it from.
Very well spoken. And speaking of community, question for all the guests. I'll start with you, Han. What role do you think the community engagement and education plays in driving and adopting Bitcoin DeFi solutions?
I think, we're a world of people, right? A society of people. So at the end, it's all about people. So communities are extremely important, especially in this phase where we are still trying to achieve mass adoption for not Bitcoin, but crypto in general. And especially when we're in this phase where the actual down-to-earth applications that can change daily lives in crypto are very rare. And if we look back in the years of crypto and look at a lot of those successful projects, by definition of, say, the token price performance, a lot of their success were driven by community engagement, right? How they manage the community, right? I think at the end of the day, it's community. The way we sort of tell stories, community shouldn't be the main driver behind the success of all blockchain projects. But as things stand today, I think that's extremely important, right? Like I think one of the panelists in the previous session mentioned that everyone knows Bitcoin, but then if you talk about Ethereum, the percentage of people who know that drops significantly, right? And in order for mass adoption to happen, in order for any DeFi application to actually achieve some sort of meaningful user base for it to go out of the industry to the traditional industry, it's important that we have community to help us advocate. So so I think it's really important. Yeah.
Very nice. Over to you next.
Yeah, I think education is really important. In terms of DeFi, we see that it is getting increasingly complex, right? So it started with AMMs, which is definitely a very strange concept, from TradFi, but then lending is already a concept that is a little bit easier to grasp. Then we got liquid staking, which is also a concept that is kind of not really a fixed income. So that's actually what got me into DeFi. And basically, it's getting more and more complex, right, with shared security, options, and so on and so forth. And I think we're getting into a point where it's getting so difficult to understand DeFi for someone that just gets into it that I think it's really important that there is content out there so that people can catch up. We definitely don't need 4 years to get the similar knowledge that I personally acquired by being in DeFi, actively involved during that time. But at the same time, we get much more professionalization of DeFi, like liquid funds getting bigger and bigger, bootstrapping protocols, doing all kind of complex strategies, and then also these kind of CDeFi platforms that have earned products and they get yield. But actually, it will be at least important that the final user at least understands like where this yield can possibly come from, so that they can do some due diligence. So I understand that they might not all want to dig into DeFi and do all these kind of different and complex transactions. But if we can get a little bit more knowledge about at least the basics, so that people can understand what's a CDeFi earn kind of deposit, where the yield actually comes from, and if you put AMM, DeFi, restake, people understand the basics, it will actually bring a little bit more confidence to them to actually getting involved and put in their BTC at work and so on.
Very nice. Over to you.
Could you repeat the question again?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. What role do you think community engagements and education play in driving the adoption of Bitcoin DeFi solutions?
I think people are curious, but they're scared when you don't know something. And I think the best way to learn is by talking to people that are knowledgeable, but also people that you trust. And that's really a community. So I think adoption is going to happen that way. I also think Bitcoin, these communities are online native. Bitcoin is a online only currency. So I think, and you guys probably can tell now that I've been into AI a bit. So I think that initially I was like, okay, I need to be a financier. I need to know economics. I need to know all these like first principles in order to then understand AMMs, lending, liquid staking, like all of that. But I'm coming around now where I don't actually think I need to come from first principles. If I can be assured with the backing of a community, I can ask an AI and it can explain to me these concepts in the way that I understand, because it can craft the documentation and the response tailored to me. So I think there's a huge impact just in general with education. But for DeFi on Bitcoin, I think it allows me not only to understand and learn, but be able to be really practical. So I may be able to like play with 10 bucks. Then I'm like, okay, 100. And then like more, and then until I go YOLO, let's all in. So I think that there's gonna be this interesting new wave. I think that with Bitcoin and DeFi and communities with AI, there is a whole new design space that's unencumbered. Like, take a look at it with a fresh start. No one knows what's gonna happen. There's a step change in AI that's happening every 9 to 12 months. Right? We didn't have Grok 3 a month ago. We didn't have DeepSeek 3 months ago, right? And so I think that you need to be grounded in traditional like finance, money, and business is business. This is just at a hyper scale with whatever you want to call it, AI or a natural language computer that allows people that don't have to be a developer, don't have to have a finance background to be involved. And what does that mean at scale? So I think it's a combination of talking to people, having communities, being online, but also using or having a fresh take on this with whatever is now here and not being unencumbered or being unencumbered from things that have traditionally been here. Because we couldn't have, like when you invented the car, we never knew that that was gonna lead to DoorDash. So what are the emergent properties and design things that we can kind of unlock now? I think that's what's exciting.
That is exciting. That was a great visual as well for me to look at. So amazing stuff. We'll jump over the next question to Hans. So how might regulatory clarity impact the development and adoption of Bitcoin DeFi protocols? And also, what are the potential implications for the users?
Yeah, so the question comes in two parts, and I'll answer the first part first. I think my take on this is very straightforward. I think regulations are extremely important, and here's why. I think people tend to see regulations as a way to constrain your abilities, but I think it's more about setting a set of rules that you can expect other people, other players in the space to abide by. That's the important part. Right? Imagine say a lawless world. Right? Laws are sort of like synonyms to regulations to some extent, right? Then say robbery is legal, and it's probably going to be more cost-effective to make money by robbing people, right? Then people who actually want to down to earth and build stuff probably are less incentivized to do so, because first of all, they look stupid if their neighbor just robs someone and make $1 million. And number two, they need to be careful about not getting robbed. So I think that's the important part of regulations. Especially, I came from the TradFi world. I actually came to the U.S. in 2008, right when the financial crisis happened, right? People were blaming regulations back then, but they were not saying that they were over-regulated, but people were blaming that the system was under-regulated. That allowed this whole crisis bubble to happen. And then I got my first job at BlackRock in 2012. That's when there was also a downturn in the market. That's when the Volcker rules got introduced, right? So regulations, I think, are definitely a good thing. But sometimes there can be over-regulations. That's something that people need to care about. But definitely not that regulations seem to be in the way of the innovation. That's I don't think that's the case. So down to the second part of the question, like what's implications for users? I think there are a couple. Number one, with the space getting more regulated, it is going to get less volatile, right? And for lack of better words, it'll be less gambling in nature, which unfortunately is what attracts a lot of crypto users these days. Meaning that as we get, let's say 5 years down the road, I don't think we'll be able to see many tokens that we can expect to have 10x, 20x, 50x return. Right? It doesn't make sense. There's no way that anything generates that much value in a shorter period of time. So it's really just a gambling stage. But when things are getting more regulated, there'll be less such events. And of course, they will drive some people away, but I think this will also attract more quality people, builders who actually understand that their returns eventually will come from the value they create, not from the gambling or the hype that they're able to generate by talking to people or by scamming people. Yeah. So I think it's definitely a positive impact going forward. Yeah.
Very well said. Coming over to Filipe, what are some of the key considerations for ensuring the security and decentralization of the DeFi protocols, particularly in the context of restaking?
So in the context of restaking, and the difference with staking is that in the staking framework, you just have validators and you delegate to them in some way, right? And especially for delegated proof of stake, when it's proof of stake, the capital provider is the same as the validator, so then you have the liquid staking protocols that came in to kind of disconnect the role of the capital provider and the validator, and then you need to trust that that liquid staking protocol is delegating to a sufficiently decentralized set of validators. However, for shared security and restaking, you have another player, which is the restaking curator. The role of the restaking curator is actually to decide which node operators in that shared security protocol, like EigenLayer, Symbiotic, and so on, which node operators you want to trust. Those node operators are running validation services to multiple networks. And so the curator needs to delegate capital to multiple node operators. And then they also need to decide how much economic security they are distributing to every single network. And that depends a lot on the slashing conditions. They can be all different. Some networks can be very difficult to validate and more risky to get slashed. So in a nutshell, its role is to enable optimal risk-adjusted rewards, right? So if you have a shared security protocol that is very centralized in the curation aspect, that can actually distort the value of economic security. And that security can disappear from one day to another if you have a very big player that is kind of the only one providing security to a specific network. And then whatever you believe was safe, let's say a price oracle, ends up having no more economic security because it was pulled out to put it somewhere else. Right? So I will say that the decentralization of the curator is very important for restaking. And I feel like it's something that is a bit underrated at the moment. Especially on the EigenLayer ecosystem, where you have very big concentration of curators, because the liquid restaking protocols are the main ones to provide capital, but they are actually the curators, because on EigenLayer you have the node operator and the curator that are the same role, and that's why on Inception we build on top of Symbiotic, where the curator and the node operator are different, a little bit like proof of stake and delegated proof of stake. Right? So we delegate the capital to the curators, and we try to make sure that there is sufficient curator diversity so that we end up having a bit more quality rewards from the networks, and make sure that it is an ecosystem that is sufficiently reliable.
I have a question, actually. Is it okay? Because you're talking about 2008, 2009. We talk about restaking. Do you think there's a solution for like the rehypothecation issue when it comes to restaking? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I will say like that will be correlation slashing. What you're like the cascading effect of something blows up, and then what will be the cascading effect on all the ecosystem. So the role of the curator, I forgot to mention, is also to basically provide risk minimization tools related to slashing. So what they have on Symbiotic, for example, is hooks, and they use third-party providers that do on-chain monitoring. And whenever there is something wrong that is happening, they're basically going to pull out economic security. And obviously, you will need to make assessments. For example, if you're delegating a lot of capital to a specific node operator and he's validating on multiple networks, if he messes up on one network, it's probably very likely that he will also mess up in all the other ones. And that's when you need to have basically that mechanism in place. But that might not be sufficient. So there is some R&D happening with the usage of DVT technology. So it's a distributed validator technology, where basically instead of delegating capital to multiple nodes, you actually create a cluster where you invite in the cluster multiple node operators. And it's a little bit like a threshold signature. Let's say that you say, in the cluster, there is 7 nodes, and we need to make sure that there is at least 4 that do the job properly. So if there is 1, 2, 3 that mess out, you're not going to be slashed. So that already exists for a beacon chain, so for ETH staking. But yeah, there are teams that are looking into it to try to basically bring the concepts for shared security, where I think that will create a lot of impact, because with restaking, as you said, there is also like enhanced slashing risk, of course. But if we can bring this kind of mitigation tools from other areas and apply it for shared security, I think they will have a lot of benefits to reduce that risk.
Very nice. I appreciate the perspective there as well. Great question. James, I'll come over to you for this question, and then we can go around the panel for this one as well. What are some potential risks you guys see or unintended consequences of rapid growth in Bitcoin DeFi, and how can they be mitigated?
That's a good question. I think it has to do culturally, right? When it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Whatever your take is, Ethereum 2017 and the DAO hack, and like social consensus, and how does that play in? So in terms of like liquid restaking potentially, is there an option for reputation? Do you have an on-chain reputation? How does the social signal versus just pure 100% game theory play? I think that if you don't keep an open mind and you have this rapid growth, and at the, it's just humans at the end, whether it's an actual human or someone controlling a synth, it's humans that are ultimately curating and making the decision. So I think that being dogmatic and not having an open mind and then having rapid growth, I think can lead to second-order consequences that you will also be blinded to. So, yeah, I think, with Bitcoin, and this is kind of somewhat outsider take. I mean, I was in Bitcoin 2013 and then moved to ETH. I think that dogmatism and hard line things are important as a foundation, but you can't be one-dimensional about it. And so thinking about it more holistically with some fundamental values and truths, I think needs to happen. Else you go sideways very quickly.
That's a great take right there. Let me go to Filipe next. Do you want me to repeat the question, or are you ready to go?
If you can repeat.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So, what are some of the potential risks or unintended consequences of rapid growth in the Bitcoin DeFi world, and how can they be mitigated as well?
Yeah, I think it's really like the risk of like over leveraging. So obviously there is a risk of restaking, and I explained the mitigation mechanisms. But if you have everyone that starts to borrow all available BTC that is available in DeFi across all the chains, to try to borrow it against some sort of BTC-LRT, getting auto-compounding rewards from all the networks that are paying for getting economic security. If there is still a slashing event, you can have even enhanced cascading effect, right? Because then you start having liquidations happening. Yeah, so I think that will be potentially one of the big issues. And depending on how it will affect the price, it can actually also impact all the other tokens that are in those assets. So there are mechanisms to prevent that or mitigate the risk, like isolated lending pools, for example. So it really basically then isolates the impact of a slashing event only to the lender of that pool, but not all the other tokens around there. But like there is no kind of master saying how DeFi needs to be built. It's a big, anarchic. So whoever has the biggest influence, the largest amount of money ends up leading people into a certain way, and sometimes it's not always necessarily the correct path for the greater good. So there is definitely some risks from that aspect. And in terms of BTC, I mean, so far, because we don't have really rewards on top of BTC, it's mostly being used as a collateral. So there is not really some sort of systemic risk. If something happens, in DeFi, it's not a very, very big risk. But when it starts to have those rewards, I think that will definitely, enhance the systemic risk if something goes wrong with any BTC-LST or BTC-LRT.
Very nice. Han?
Yeah, I think it would be a good problem to have. Like, we're going too fast what to do. I don't think we're there yet, but if I were to talk about potentially what could happen, what are the potential issues if we go too fast, I think it's going to be the same set of issues that happen to anything that goes too fast, because incentives will change, right? The general quality will decrease. People tend to try to ride the momentum. And then when you're in an industry or anything that grows too fast, people tend to start to have a different risk appetite. They might start overseeing the risk. I think James and also Filipe mentioned great that people tend to over leverage. People tend to start to think that, I understand the risk, but there might be systematic risk that people sort of ignore, right? And then obviously there will be malicious players entering this space, scammers, hackers, and on top of that, based on the people tending to ignore this risk more than average, that can become an issue. But in this case, I think general sense of risk and obviously a more mature regulatory framework, technical or non-technical, can help. Yeah.
Very nice. We'll come to the last question here. We'll go across the panel. Got just a couple minutes left, so we'll just keep these like a minute or so each. I'll come to you, Han, first. So, looking ahead now, what are some of the most critical areas of research and development needed to ensure the continued growth and also the stability of the Bitcoin DeFi ecosystem?
The first thing that comes to my mind is definitely still security, because the whole one of the basis of blockchain is trustless, right? And then in order for that to happen in a scalable way, security is key. And especially, again, I just want to mention that the recent Bybit hack, right? It's quite heartbreaking, and given that it's happened on blockchain and it's trustless, it's really hard to mitigate the damage, right? I think it's definitely not, that doesn't make the industry look good. So maybe the second thing is I think just a general focus of the builders on the right questions. Given that blockchain, crypto, we're very close to money, so there are many projects out there are driven by monetary incentives, and they might take shortcuts that eventually can bring about catastrophes, right? I think it's important that we can have a more calm and focused vision and build the right stuff, and knowing that long-term vision, long-term growth is the key, not short-term benefit, because the industry is still small, right? I think if you just look at market cap, crypto is tiny. So any claim saying that we can overturn financial market, I think that's just ridiculous, right? So yeah, that's my take.
Very nice. Over to you.
Yeah, I think it's the part related to Bitcoin bridging. So that's one of the problems that BitLayer have been trying to solve with BitVM. So enabling the bridging in a permissionless way with similar type of security guarantees as Bitcoin. It's definitely super complex thematic and still not very mature as a solution. In the meantime, while we have trusted kind of wrapped custodial BTCs available, like Coinbase BTC, Wrap BTC, and so on and so forth. So most people trust those solutions at the moment, and I mean it's okay. Like if you're an institution, you kind of need to delegate your responsibility about putting into custody BTCs from other people, and you feel more comfortable to put the responsibility on someone that is regulated, meaning a crypto custodian, than a trustless bridge, right? That's a bit difficult to justify when you're handling other people's money in a substantial amount. But for other people that really care about the ethos of Bitcoin and so on, well, in that case, they will prefer to have a solution that is as trustless as possible.
Very nice. Over to you for the final take.
Yeah, I think security is like the #1 issue. I think still we don't have a great way to manage our keys, really. So I don't have a solution. And this is why it's still an issue. This is why, you can have a Bybit, right? So I think that, yeah, it really is just making it easy for an everyday person that has a life and managing their life to be able to know that they can manage their keys easily, securely, and safely.
Very nice. Guys, that is going to wrap up our panel today. Big shout out to all of you who came through and stuck around. It's an amazing conversation. So yeah, let's give it up for everybody up here. And thank you again to BitLayer for putting on the conference.